So in this segment of colonial society, we're going to be talking about political structures in the colonies as well as the experiences of Anglo-British American women in the colonies. So let's get into it. So when it comes to political structures, in relation to the establishing of governors, there were three types of political structures in the colonies that took place. So first was the provincial. This was most tightly controlled by the crown. The king appointed all of the governors, and this took place in New Hampshire, New York, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, as well as Georgia. And then we see proprietary structures in Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, Maryland. And it was very similar to provincial. Governors were appointed by a lord proprietor, who was a person who purchased or received rights to the colony from the crown. And the proprietary structure had a bit more freedoms and liberties. And then finally, we see the charter, which was had in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And they had the most complex system of government. They formed political corporations or interest groups that developed a charter that distinguished the powers between the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches of government. That sounds familiar. And then also they elected their own governors from among the property-owning men of the colony. After the governor, colonial government was broken down into two key divisions, the council and the assembly. The council was the governor's selected cabinet, often chosen from prominent members of the colony, where the assembly was comprised of elected property-owning men whose official goal was to ensure that colonial law was in alignment with English law. The people of the assembly often came from local districts. They approved of new taxes and also of the colonial budgets. And they also believed that it was their responsibility to check the power of the governor, as the council really wasn't doing that because they were specifically appointed by the governor, right? So the assembly believed that we have a constituency because they were elected, and we need to make sure that the governor is not basically becoming a king. And so the Anglo-American woman in the colonial era. So there was an increase in land as well as natural resources, and this allowed for greater fertility, and so people began to get married earlier. However, we see family sizes starting to shrink in the 1700s. A part of this is that you have people moving away from being producers to being consumers. And so what a part of that means is that you're no longer putting your children to work. So you no longer need 10 children so that they all can be producing the same thing for you, right? And so that affords the ability to have smaller family sizes, but also we see even literary movements inspiring this idea of a romantic relationship or romantic marriages. What is the point of a marriage? Before, it was a business contract, right? It wasn't about love. It was about bringing families together for power or for business, or to uplift one's station in life. But now we see this idea of the companionate ideal where couples are referring to each other lovingly, and are engaged in a romantic relationship as well as a marriage. Imagine. I don't mean outside of the marriage, I mean inside of their marriage, just to be clear. And we also see some women being able to sit on juries. So in 1701 in Albany, New York, there was a jury that was comprised of both men and women hearing criminal as well as civil cases. In 1769, colonies based their laws on English common law, and this stated that, quote unquote, by marriage, the husband and wife are one person in the law. And we also see the concept of coverture. And so coverture speaks to this idea that once a woman is married, she loses all of her legal rights to her own property, her own belongings, her own stuff, right? And now, because by marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law, she loses that part of her identity and her property. And by the 1790s, we also see divorce rates and abandonment rates rising throughout the colonies. as well. All right, I'm going to pause this here and stay tuned for the next segment in colonial society.